welcome everybody back to Coffee and Consoles. I'm Jeff. Gil is here. Robert Miller is here. Tony Joy is here from Avid. And this one should be a little bit different. Conceptually, I want to take you, and I've got a slightly different view this time, but I kind of want to get a little bit more detail and take you through some really practical, not necessarily a lot of super new stuff, but really look at some practical ways to manage your desk and manage settings and just really pragmatic, essential functions on the desk. And along the way, since we've been talking to a number of customers that came from Decontrol and Decommand, try to make some analogies, if you will, between some of those ideas and similar operations that are just slightly different or have more different requirements to do. And certainly, as always, if you want to jump in on something or take it in a slightly different direction, we can do that. You can throw things in the chat, and at some point Gil will interrupt me, or just interrupt me. That's fine too. But I just want to present a little bit of what we have here first. If you haven't seen this before, I'm sitting in front of a S6. I know this has changed kind of from month to month because we're just deploying different types of systems. And right now Jeff, I have
you got a floating window there that for the recording. I don't know. We're all seeing it. It's kind of blocking the knob module.
Floating window for the recording.
I don't see that.
I'm not seeing that.
I don't see
That's
that.
really crazy.
I see it. I see it.
Okay, it's my window. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. So I have an S6 now, and we've some of these previous ones we've done. I had an S4. It's great. They're all excellent surfaces and very malleable, right? So you can make what you need. I think that's really a powerful part of this. I tried to zoom in a little bit, so we're really going to try to keep the discussion into right here. That's kind of why I showed this, and this stuff is really important. So that's why I'm showing it in some detail. You can see a little bit of the attention fader, but I tried to kind of zoom in so we could discuss some things with a little bit more clarity. Often we're kind of just seeing the entire console, which you can see right now in the sys configuration view, so you can see I've got 16 contiguous faders. We're going to talk about this because I think this is really important, this concept of, am I using this as a traditional knob bucket, or am I using it as a special attention zone? And this really comes back to, it'll come back to this conversation on Icon about, the dedicated EQ and dyne panel. And I think that's a really important part of this. So we're going to talk about that because that's really important. And we're going to talk about managing food groups, which is always important. And along the way, we're going to not try to get into too much settings, but that's always part of the conversation because, again, you can set it up the way you want to work. And it does require a little bit of tweaking of some settings to understand and to get what you want, right? So that's kind of what I'll say about that. So I've got a 16 fader S6, again, with fader, knob, and process you're not going to see. And I kind of chose what I wanted to see. So I'm going to call out if I make a change up there, and you can just, again, whether it's S6 or S4, it doesn't matter. If I go up to push an EQ button, that EQ button would be right here for S4. So it's totally analogous, and I'll explain in detail what we're doing when we do it. But the objective here really was to try to get around, get some practical knowledge, and just understand some of the more, practical, specific things. And along the way, I'm going to tether my own brain. I've actually got some things loaded in here. This is kind of funny. I pulled down this free. This is where you take a picture of your outboard gear. So I stole this and loaded in. I appropriated my own documents from Decontrol, just to remind me what I actually wanted to talk about with regard to some comparisons along the way of some of these things. So you can see I've got the world's smallest Pro Tools edit window, and I did that kind of on purpose because I wanted to focus on the console and the touch screen, which we're either going to look at the tracks page, the home page, or in general specific settings related to the discussion. So that's kind of that's what you're seeing over there, and we will use that. We've just got a simple music session we're going to work with. It's going to give us a canvas to be able to explain some things, okay? So before we do anything else, let's talk about zones as always, but also talk about justification, because I think that's really important. So one really useful feature, especially in the world's smallest edit window, is to use the modifiers Shift Control, and you could do it on your QWERTY keyboard. You can do it on your any fader module on the desk, but hold down Shift Control and touch a track select. And so what that just did is it justified that track, even though this is in a spill zone. It doesn't matter if it's in normal banked or in a folder spill zone or VCA spill zone. Doesn't matter, right? It's going to give me the ability to quickly say, I want to work on that track. I want to see it immediately, right? That's really powerful. And then I could make it as big or small as I want. We'll talk about wheel functions in a little bit, but again, show me the room for the drums. Shift Control, select, and you're now justified as the top track or the leftmost track in the mix window, top track in the edit window. That's a really good one. And then if I press select on that track, it's going to put the insertion onto that track. And I guess we'll just go there a little bit right now. And what's really useful is press the trim button near the jog wheel. It's right here. And that's set up to move the playhead. And if you're in a music session, these can snap. You can see these are snapping to quarter notes, right? That's what that's doing. We can zoom in a little bit. We're going to do zoom horizontal so you can see a little bit better. But back to trim, you can see those are quarter notes. And if I actually wanted to select an actual chunk of, 4 bars or something, while I'm doing this, let's just go there for a second, I would press mark out, because it's saying I want to define from here to here. What is the out that I want to designate? So I've lit up mark out, and then I just roll until I get, 4 bars. And you can see there's 4 bars, right? And it's snapping. Because I'm in grid, because I'm using the wheel, I can then take the mark out off. I have 4 measures. And, I could even go back into trim and say, I want this 4 bars to start at, bar 12, right? And take trim off, okay? So these are some really kind of useful things that are, you can use constantly. To quickly say, hey, get rid of that selection. In this same section right here, there's a down arrow, and you're going to clear that. And that's what that does. So mark out, I want 8 bars, right? And I'm just going to roll through. There's 8 bars. Take the mark out off. Trim. Move the thing around, right? If you need to move the selection, you can. If you want to kill the selection, down arrow. Okay? So we'll start with that. Let's do some basic stuff like selecting track ranges, doing a due to selected, and then taking advantage of, this is another great one, trying to kind of make your life more efficient. I think those are always really important things. Most people have kind of a go-to EQ or go-to compressor. Obviously, there's people that use, multiple tools on one track for different uses. I get that. You could be surgical, you could be vibing, there could be a lot of different ways you use EQ, but usually people have kind of a go-to compressor or EQ. And so I've set mine up as such. You can see I've got Avid Pro Compressor for default dyne, and right now the default EQ is Pro Q3, okay? And I've also got this set up to auto insert default plugin from Surface, and I'm gonna show you that just in a second right now. What that allows me to do is say, if I need to get the Pro Compressor on here and I don't have it, I can simply press the dyne button on that track. So what I wanted to show you relatively quickly is just within, these are just normal bank tracks right now. There's nothing here. I do have a spill zone open here, which we're going to talk about in a second, but I'm looking at some drum tracks, okay? I'm going to just do some basic selection. The select switches are right here. So on an S6, you have select and swap. Swap's a new feature. We can maybe talk about that a little bit. We talked about it last week, but I'm making selections one by one. Right? Or I'm holding down the shift key and saying, select from kick drum 1 to snare bottom. And that's a range, right? Likewise, I could do the same thing just by holding 1 and selecting a bunch of stuff. That's a totally appropriate another way to do it. So I've got a chunk of stuff selected. And I'm going to take advantage of due to selected, which you're going to find right here. And this is the top page of soft keys. If you're ever kind of lost, and you've got, all kinds of various God knows what sitting here, you can always do Shift 0. That's the default. And this is set up intentionally like, okay, hopefully this is the most kind of practical starting point to jump off to get some things done. So that's the point of this, right? Go back to shift 0. So shift on any fader module, press a numeric switch. Those are all different workflows. 0 is default. That gets you back to automation 1, 2, session management, those kind of really basic, essential things. So I'm going to turn on due to selected, which is right here. It lights up. So it's going to say on the things I've selected, I want to perform an operation. So right now, these are living in insert view. So I can see the chain. Okay. And we'll talk about preferences a little bit. Right now it's 1-to-1, meaning it is, well, actually, we'll look at that in a second. You can format whether you want the first insert to be here or the first insert to be here. It's totally up to you, but you have the options and the preferences to do that. We'll look at that, but stay tuned. So I've got a selection. Did somebody say something?
Nope.
Okay, cool. I've got a selection. I've got due to selected, and I'm basically going to go, and you're not going to see this, but I'm going to press the dine button on my process, or the dine, which would be an S4 right here. Okay. And so that's going to say, I want to add pro compressor to these selected tracks. I'm going to go back to inserts, and you're going to see, and I know I've got the window up there right now, but you're going to see my signal chain now has trim EQ3 and pro comp, right? That's what's there. And if I either push that or I push the dine switch, now in line, I have access to that, and I could do that for all of them, right? And this one has multiples. We're going to talk about cycle in a second, but we'll just cycle over real quick and we'll come back to that. Okay. So now I am looking at 2 different pro comps on the different kicks. Okay. So that's the start. I'm going to go back to, and actually, that's actually a good pivot. Because I have kind of a very specific setup here, and I've got floating windows that are going to pop up. Let's talk about windowing, because this is an important and can be infuriating for some people because they don't know what they're asking the system to give them, right? And we always talk about windowing. How do I manage my windows better, right? So these channels are in green. Green is always dynamic. Here, let me get rid of this so you can see this. Actually, here, we'll go back to dine, and I'll actually close the window. I just want to show you this a couple different ways. So these windows, these are set right now to intentionally pop up the thing that I touch. So let's look at that real quick. Let's go to settings, and let's scroll down and see, this is the user settings, the primary settings on the desk. Let's see what we told it to bring up, right? So we told it if I touch a plugin, whether it's a harmonizer, EQ, dine, bring that up right when I touch the encoder. I told it to do that. I can also tell it to do sends, to pan, plugins. I can be very specific about what I want. And so if we go, and now let's go look at a send, for example, on this next track here. I'm pressing the send switch. It's yellow. Yellow is always sends. I'm going to basically attention that real quick so you can see sends on the center section as well. You see these guys here. So whether I touch a send on the center section or whether I touch a send here, now, because I changed the preference, it says, oh, he wants to see a floating send window, right? And it's giving me exactly what I told it to do, right? I've asked it to do that. So that's kind of the important first part. I'm going to turn that off now just to contrast that slightly, just so we can have that conversation. Okay, so now if I go and grab a send, yeah, I have full control over it here or here, right? But it's not going to bring it up. It is a choice, right? I get to pick what happens, what comes up, where it comes up, all that kind of thing. Okay. So that's the first important part. Cycle, also very important because nobody uses generally just one EQ often within a session. So how do I get to and manage multiple EQs or multiple dynamics tools on one track? Well, you leverage cycle. And we're going to look at zones here in just a second, but and also this, you can't see this, but we'll talk about all this. So let's do this. Let's look at our room track. I'm going to attention the room track. If you're not familiar, and just conversely formatting my brain a little bit, the triangle on S4, S6 is attention. Attention is focus. For coming from D-command, D-control, it's focus, okay? It's just that you don't have to modally change. Those consoles had a little, are you want to be in select mode? You want to be in focus mode. This always has a dedicated little triangle, which you can just press, and you saw room show up automatically on this intersection, which is great. And I can have dedicated stuff show up on the fat, the option modules as well, which we'll talk about. So I attention that. And now I want to look at, let's look at signal flow. Signal flow is the insert button. Signal flow is going to be, and actually maybe this is the right time to show the preference that shows the signal flow, because that's actually really useful, I believe. So what we want to do is really quickly, I'm going to go through here and we're going to go look at this section that says knobs. Right now it's reversed. So I have to flip my brain from what Pro Tools is looking at. If you look in Pro Tools, obviously it's EQ3 Pro Comp, Pro Q3, Pro C2. It's flipped. And depending on the size of your console and where things are located, you might want to flip it to get to that easier. I'm going to turn that off because I actually want to see it one-to-one. So that, look, EQ3 Pro Comp, Fab Filter, and it's exactly what I think it is, right? So I just turned that option off to bring the first insert down here. Totally up to you again. Now these are options you guys can explore and see what makes sense. But we're now in signal flow view, okay? And that's what teal is. And if I push in on one of those, I can get to parameters, which we're going to get to in a second. But let's look at cycle. So if I have multiple EQs, which I do, EQ3 and Pro Q, so Fab Filter, I'm going to press EQ, which you can't see, but it is on the strip here. And it's going to bring up the first, whatever the first thing happens to be. And you can see in this case, it's Pro Q3. All I've got to do is press double tap the EQ button, and it's going to go to the next EQ on that track. Okay, so get back to Pro Q, double tap EQ, you're back to. So that is how, so that is how you basically, and you could have 5 EQs, right? You could have 6, you could have 7, you could have a whole bunch, and you could cycle between all of them. The thing to understand, which is a little bit confusing for some people at first.
This email on eBay real quick.
All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
If you're not chatting, if you could mute, that would be great. Please. So the thing to understand is it remembers where you left off. And the reason is if I go to Dyn real quick, right? If I press EQ once, it's kind of back to remember the last time I used it in EQ, it was Pro Q3. I have to double tap to kind of get into cycle mode. Once I'm in cycle mode, I just keep hitting the EQ and then it will roll through all the different EQs. And that's kind of how that works. Okay. So I think that's important. While we're talking about this, because this really is totally analogous to these dedicated sections on Dcommand Dcontrol, let's talk about utilizing your real estate in an efficient way. And so right now, we're looking at just inline of this EQ, just taking up, and we'll take this off for a second, just taking up only 4 encoders, right? But really the beautiful way to control this tool is to expand it. And you can do an expand locally. So again, whether you're on S6 or S4, you have an expand button. And that is going to appropriate the whole knob section to give you control. And so if I go and let's just go grab a high mid band, and we'll just throw this over here for just a second so it looks a little bit different. I have, as you're probably already familiar with from those consoles, gain frequency Q, right? And this actually has an extra one. There's slope, and then the enable, right? Okay, and your low mid and your filters, right? So that's a really powerful way to control. So now while we're here, we've kind of locked that off, right? We're working on drums. I'm going to close this just for a second. On the right side, let's just talk about spill zones real quick because I'm going to leverage this. Going to go back to surface. This right here, which represents, this is a spill zone. This is the right spill zone. That is opened up right here with this switch that you can see right there. And I can say, show me VCAs in there, right? So I'm going to say, show me VCAs. You see VCA. And let's just say, also show me drums. I already have drums, yes, but I want to see them again because I love drums. But what I'm going to do, just to show you this behavior, is bring up the same tool, right? What am I working on? I'm working on the room mic right now, which has, as you remember, the Pro Q on it, okay? I'm just going to locally invoke the dynamics as well, which is probably a pro compressor. Okay, so I'm going to go and on In the spill zone, I'm going to press Dyn, right, up on the process module. And Dyn is right there. Okay, so now check this out. I'm just going to try to manage my windows a little bit better here. I've got control. I'm controlling, as you can see, the room pro comp. If I come over here, I'm controlling the EQ, fab filter EQ, right, on the same track. So the point of this is that every bucket is totally independent, either working on the same track, a different EQ or compressor on the same track, or totally different tracks across the desk, as many buckets as you have. That's a really important concept, that, you know, I don't just have to do everything right here. I can, as much real estate on the desk as I have, I can open up and just leave these controls, which is really powerful. So that's just there. The second I touch it, and again, that preference for the windows I showed you is set to I told it to come up. Okay. The other thing in here that I really want to mention, which I think is really important, especially with Pro Q3, two things. One, because Pro Q3 is so powerful, I believe it does 24 bands plus dynamics. So it's pretty nuts. But you want to have a simple interface as well. And that is what the guys at FabFilter call the flat 7 bands. Okay. So what I would highly recommend is not only do you start with the flat 7 bands, but, you know, if you want to leverage, you know, your center being a tilt versus a parametric, you set it up the way you want for each of those 7 bands. And then you come in here, save your setting, and then do a set as user default. That's a really great way to roll, because if I do that, you know, add to the track, I don't have an EQ, it pops up. It pops up in a starting place that is really predictable. I know exactly what it is. While we're here, I'm going to close this for just a, actually, I'm not going to close it. I'm going to move it over. While we're here, I want to show you a couple of nulling bits that are important. So you can always hold down Option, and you can basically null, right? You can default a view, right? So you can also take advantage of clear. So I'm going to go up here, and we're going to do clear EQ. And clear EQ is defaulting it. So it defaulted back to RR default. That is my user setting. Not only is that in a flat 7 bands, but it has some filters started that I might prefer depending on the workflow that I'm doing, right? So take advantage of, for this type of thing for ProQ, because I want to show you the converse of this with the inserts view. Take advantage of user settings are great for everything, for EQ, for Dyn, for reverbs. Use a user setting, tweak it as your starting place, save as user. That's a great place to start. And then something like ProQ3, you get the beauty of the predictability on the magenta view, which we call EQ. I'm going to pop out, right? This is just in line now. Let's go back to inserts. I'm going to press the insert switch. Okay. Now I'm looking at ProQ3, and I'm going to press it. Okay. I'm going to go into teal mode. And it expanded in teal mode. Now, what is this? Well, this is what I said. This is the advanced mode. So this is 24 bands plus dynamics. So this is, you know, slightly intimidating, but it's got tons of control. And I can go and grab a band. Let's just go grab band 3, for example, right? And obviously I have gain, frequency, Q, and all that goodness. But then I've got all the dynamic settings, right? The range, the threshold, even, you know, whether I'm doing MS, but it allows me to get to every one of those 24 bands. But your meat and potatoes, your bread and butter, really is going to be leveraging that via EQ, right? And that is pressing EQ, jumping into expand, and that is the really, really nice, predictable interface. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to hit clear again. So again, clear EQ. And that flattens that, right? That takes me back to user default, which is really nice. And I can take the expand off. That takes me out. I can take the expand off here also. That takes me out of expand there. Both zones, I've left expand, okay? A couple other things I started to talk about, and there's never enough time to talk about everything. But one thing that's useful, if you do have that setting turned on that says if I touch something, right? Again, I touched a knob, and therefore you brought a plugin up. How do I get that to go away? Well, you do have a dedicated plugin window right here. You can do that. But you can also, if I change the function, like if I go into, for example, bus, it's going to say a bus doesn't have a plugin association, and therefore it's going to get rid of that window as well. Okay, if you do want to keep up, if you do want that window, you want to keep the view in Dyn, you simply want to get rid of the window. You do have a dedicated window switch right here. You have a dedicated plugin, send, pan, everything right here. And that is in the top level under system management. Again, I touch, you know what, get rid of that. It's right here. That's how you get rid of that window. Okay. But again, you could also hit something like bus or input or another function that does not have a window associated with it, if that makes sense. Okay. Cool. Okay, we did a little bit of nulling. We did some clearing. Just a quick, take advantage of this because it's really powerful kind of conversation. I'm going to go to the room track. I'm going to go back to inserts and I'm going to select it. Okay. I'm going to do Shift 7 just to change to a different modus over here. And I'm going to hit Save Track Preset. And there are jumps in here to say, you know what, I love what's going on here. I just want to preserve it because I'm going to forget this particular treatment of the room. Save it, right? Save every attribute of the processing chain on this track and then file it, right? File it in my folder. It's a great thing to just instantly get back to a chunk of settings for one or multiple tracks. So again, that's just leveraging a little bit of soft keys that you can do really quickly. Okay. Let's take a little bit look at some grouping and some more selections and suspends. I know people always suspends and things are very, very common, very useful. So I'm just going to change these all back into inserts view.
Yeah.
Inserts is all, yeah.
I have a quick, sorry to break in. But
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I just wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
on the when you set up the way you just did, and you go back, like now I use preview all the time for things back and forth.
Yep.
But if you're on that previous settings where you had and you wanted to jump to oh damn it, I lost my train of thought. Too late. Okay. See you in a moment.
Well, we'll come back. We'll look at some automation and maybe we'll re-jog it because I do want to show a little bit of like auto match and preview and some of the match points on the faders. That reminds me to do that because there's so much cool stuff to show. Let's actually do automation after I do some grouping and then we'll come back to that. We can probably stimulate your brain a little bit. So let's just do a little bit of simple grouping, I think, and leveraging, folding in some shortcuts, customization as well, which I think is great. So what we're going to do is, this is very simple. I'm just going to do a select again. I'm going to select a couple kick drums here. I got 3 of them. And you'll have to excuse me because this is this is an old console from, before 2014. And that's what I have. So my Switch just kind of lost its mind for a second, but that's okay. So I've got my kick drums selected. And I'm going to make a new group. Okay, and the easiest way to do this is, again, top level, press the groups button. It's going to light up the top 2 kind of panels on the master module. And really quickly, in my application here, I would make a new mix only group. So I'm just going to press new mix. And it says, what do you want to call this? Just call this kicks. Okay. Now those you can see explicitly are linked, right? That's right there. And just some basic stuff right now, right? I'm going to suspend this group and then we'll do a global suspend as well. So I can see all my groups. I can see that I have kicks right here. It's lit up. I'm going to suspend it, right? And now kicks has been suspended. As you can see, I'm going to turn that back on. Good to go. The global suspend is right here, right? It'll flash and say, hey, just so you know, everybody's suspended. And that's what that does right there. Okay. While we're in this conversation, let's just quickly show groups view, because that's also kind of misunderstood for a bunch of people. And I'm going to again, there's a dedicated group switch on S4 and on the S6 process module. I just pressed it for each of those. And I just want to show you the analog of what we just did on the channels and not on the soft keys, just so you can reference that. Okay. So my kick group is active. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to page. These little lower arrows are page. I have a whole bunch of groups. If you want to see more, you could certainly hit expand, and it'll blow up all of the groups, so you can see all the groups. And I can take expand off. So I've only got 4 knobs, so it's going to show me 4 groups at a time, and that's what that's doing. That's why I'm paging. But I want to show you that not only is this group active, right? There's the suspend. So the cell on the group, on the actual channel strip for kicks, is the ability to suspend or enable individual groups. The in switch is a quick way to add or remove a member from a group, right? So I can take the third kick out of that group, and it is no longer a part of that group. Okay, and that's what that does. It's now been associated now with that group, and you'll see that in multiple places on the display modules, etc. You'll see kind of how that works, and then that group is enabled, etc. Okay, so I wanted to show a little. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I remember
No problem.
my question before.
Yeah,
we
sure.
went too far. When you're in track, so I'm always saving track presets. But when you were showing the track preset, I'm wondering if there's a way to set that track preset to a default. In other words, every time I want to save a track preset, I've got to go into select the parameters you want, and then you go back and then you save it. But so, for example, let's say I don't want a particular function to be saved as part of the track preset. So I have to go in there, deselect it. But I'm wondering if there's a way. Yeah, that's the window, right?
Absolutely. There's under track data to recall. There's our fun little chiclet and preset system.
Right.
And it's sticky. So you set these up for the things that you care about preserving by default. It should be sticky, and you can even have different settings files to recall different subsets of data. And then that's it. It should. You can see mine does not have clips and media, yada yada yada. But yeah, take advantage of the presets in the chiclet system.
But what I'm talking about is I would like it so because I'm often saving track presets with a bunch of things that I don't want because I forget to go to that track data to recall. I'm wondering if there's a way to set up a default for me that always comes up without having to go into that extra step, go to track data to recall, and then click a button. I have that, but I'd like to be able to set up a default track preset so that if I set that as, say, preset 1, that every time that comes up, it defaults to that without having to go to that track data to recall.
Right. So let's just do a quick test. Right. Let's go back to save track preset, and I'm just doing another one. We'll just do room 3, and we'll go back to track data recall. And okay, so yeah, I guess right now it would require me to press 2 or 1 or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Well, we can feed. Yeah, we can feed that back. It should be sticky. I would think that it should be sticky, but we can feed that back. Okay. Yeah. So, but no, it's a killer. It's a killer. If you're not using this, you should use this because it's fantastic. Okay, so quickly back to groups, and then we'll move on. I want to talk about automation a little bit. So real quick, I built a group. I'm done with it. Maybe it was a one-shot move. Whatever. I want to get rid of it. I'm going to go back into groups. Groups comes up here, and I'm just going to say, you know what? Blow away that kicks group. I say delete group and press whatever group I want. It says, do you really want to do this? Yeah, sure. Okay, kicks is gone. That group has been destroyed, and it no longer shows up in the grid, and it no longer shows up in the individual channel views for those things. Okay, so that's just a little bit about some basic grouping stuff. Before we get too far, okay, one more thing before we go to automation, because this one is fantastic, and I want to show it again because I think it's great. So zones, food groups, and scroll into view and scroll to track. Those are the things I want to show real quick. Okay. So I just happen to only have 16 faders, and I've got 2 8-fader spill zones set up. You can do whatever you want. A spill zone can be any number of faders. You can have up to 2 of them. So if you got 1,000,000 faders on your big S6, you could have a 32 fader spill zone if you want. You could have a 4 fader spill zone. Whatever makes sense for your workflow, you can do. Okay. So what I want to do is show 2 different things. Right now, I have only a spill zone open on the right side, right? So if I want to go to the base, I'm going to press a menu. It takes you back up. This is lit up, and I'm going to basically spill the bass instruments into this. I know you can't see the whole bucket, but you can see part of it. The bass tracks are now in here. Trust me. But maybe I want to see, the acoustic guitars at the same time. So what I could do is I could take advantage of scroll to track, and I could literally start typing a name, ACE, could be string 5, could be snare top, whatever, right? Hit enter. And that was brought to me right here. And right here for me is based on my banking justification mode. It happens to be left because this is my first fader, if you will. So it brought me that track that I was looking for. And again, back to the whole shift control thing, right? We talked about this. Shift control is going to top justify whatever you grab and bring it to you, right? And it's a very handy thing. If I want to see the fret list real quick, shift control, touch the select, you got the fret list. If I want to see, I want to get to an effects, a reverb return quickly, right? And part of that, and Gil does this as well, I think is smart, is scroll to tracks, start typing. We like to use X as a first letter. So the nice thing about that is you just type X and you're like, oh yeah, I need the drum hall. Boom, there it is. Here's the drum hall, right? And so now that I've got that, I could get into this verb in a matter of seconds. And actually, while we're doing this real quick, before we get to automation, I know I just said one more thing. I do want to show you 3 different ways to kind of get into this, because this is the drum return, okay? If I push this knob, right now I just want to make this clear because there's a lot of cool workflows in here that you should explore. Right now I have this ticked, insert selection. That's pretty fun because it says, you know what, don't worry about bringing up this reverb on the 4 knobs. I really want to see more information. So what insert selection says is if I push it, steal the whole knob module. That's what that says, which is really cool. So, here's your diffusion. Here's your pre-delay. And it did it in one move. Conversely, if I don't have that on, it's going to take me first. Let me put this over here. If I just touch it first, it's going to take me into inline 4 knobs at a time mode. And then I'd have to hit expand to get into this mode, right? Let's do one more thing. If I want to now take it further and get like the LARC, like the Lexicon remote control kind of thing, I have to hold down expand. Again, either on your process module, or you can find that in the middle in your S4. Now I'm into, that fader control mode, right? I've got a custom map that I've set up, and I want a plate, and I want that decay time and whatever. That's really powerful. But let's shorten that whole step. Let me just show you how to shorten that whole thing if you want. This is totally up to you once again. I'm going to enable auto expand faders, and I'm going to enable insert selection. What does that do? Well, it says, presumably, and we'll do it with a different tool just so you can see the difference. Let's do the steps over again. Let's go to scroll to track. Let's hit X. Let's pick something different. Let's say we've got a plate. There's a keys plate. I'm going to choose that now. It brought me the keys plate. Check it out. I did set the settings differently, right? If you remember. Now, if I push this knob, it's going to, in one fell swoop, and let's just show this so you get all the goodness, all the good stuff at once. It's over there. It did everything at once. It said he wants total control. Everybody wants total control. And so, basically, there is all of your control, the K time and pre-delay and drive and your blend, okay? So you got everything now, and it's in both places. But some people don't like to lose their faders if they're doing balances, And that is why you might not turn auto expand faders on. You just might have one setting that says, you know what, give it to me here. I can tweak the drive here, but I still have my levels. And if I want more control, I hold down expand. And then it takes me into that kind of next level where I've got everything else, right? If that makes sense. So yeah, settings are important. They matter, and they can affect, how you flow and getting what you want right quickly, I think is really, really important. Okay. Automation. Let's go to automation because I've got enough for like 6 hours, but that's just the way I work. So let's go back to our drums. We'll take advantage of the same feature again. Scroll the track. I'm going to type in kick, right? Boom. We're back to kick drums. Let's just look at, let's look at inserts real quick. We're back to our drums. We got some stuff over here. I guess those are bass tracks. So what I want to do is I want to look at a little bit of automation modes changing, gain reduction, and auto match, right? That's really important too. Okay, so let's just say quick ways to get these into automation modes, right? Let's say I want touch latch on a couple tracks quickly. What I would do, again, back to home, shift 0, back to home. I'm going to hold down touch latch, and I'm going to say I want touch latch here, I want touch latch here, I want touch latch here, I want touch latch here. Okay, that's just one possible way to get those into that. Now, if you wanted everything on the entire desk there, yeah, you could do option touch latch. That would work. But in this case, I don't want that. I just want to hold down touch latch and either hit the fader, hit the F or the select. Either way, it works both ways. Okay, these are in an automatable mode. I'm gonna choose to, this is already selected. I'm gonna go use my wheel and do a little zoom vertical. So we got more real estate. I just stretched it up a little bit. I'm gonna hit play. We're gonna write something, some amazing move here you've never seen before. And I'm gonna use Command Control, and we'll zoom in just a little bit as well so you can see better. Okay, what is Command Control? Well, this goes back to the, old Pro Tools and D-Command and D-Control, all those days. Command Control is great. It's basically, and you can do it on the QWERTY, you can do it on the fader, you can do it anywhere you want to do it. But if I touch anything on the strip, it'll give me that view, right? If I touch the pan, I can see if there's a pan move. If I've got sends, if I want to see if there's some send moves, right, which we'll write some stuff in a second, I can see instantly. If I go back to the fader, I can see my volume automation, right? So a couple things I want to show you here. And first of all, actually, let's do it on the room because that has a little bit of different view. We'll do it both ways first here. So when I hit play, you have a little dancing amber LED, and that is representative of the automation breakpoints on the disk, right? So instead of just having the triangle, you're up or you're down to get the match point, we actually give you kind of a virtual breakpoint, which is on the rightmost ladder of the LED. So check this out. If I hit play, it's going to show me where I need to go back to match to that value. Right now it's at negative infinity. It's all the way down, right? Oh, now it's coming up. That's the match point, which if I'm in touch, which I am because it's touch latch, I let go and it goes back to that place. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That is nice to have that indication. The downward green that's also on the middle ladder, that is gain reduction, and that's affected by obviously your dynamics on the track. One more thing. There's always one more thing, but let's go to inserts. This is really important. What's that? Oh, okay. So let's go to I'm going to go to automation 4 and automation prefs. Right now, I have enable plugin automation turned off. And what is that? It says when I instantiate a plugin, do I want every parameter to be enabled or not? Well, the track's in a writable mode. If I push on Pro Compressor to see it, hey, you know what? None of those LEDs are lit up, so there's nothing enabled. Okay, cool. Well, and this is not that different from D-Control. I can hold on all three modifiers, Command, Option, Control, and I could touch, I could touch just threshold ratio, for example, if I just wanted to only isolate those particular things. If I go back to the top level, inserts, the chain, right, we'll get rid of this plugin again. I can choose to enable all parameters on any one of those, right? So now if I press Command Control Option, same modifiers, I can now basically get rid of anything that was on there. And likewise, I could add everything or remove everything from EQ3, right? So again, Command Control Option and in, right? And now you've seen everything is now enabled for that, okay? So you've got a couple different ways to do this. We'll go back out, get out of expand, get out of there. If you're not enabled, let's just say the quickest way to do this, the quickest way to get things all enabled if you want, is to dive into a particular plugin. Like we're looking at EQ3 right now. You can see that obviously, right? And the quickest way to get this enabled would be to either on your process module or your S4 is to press the function switch. And function is going to turn on all parameters for the current thing that you're looking at, okay? That's, I think, a really useful thing. So that's assuming you don't have this preference on right here that says automatically enable all parameters, okay? Obviously now I can be granular about what I want to turn on or turn off. And again, I'm using those three modifiers, Command, Option, Control, in the view of all the parameters, okay?
Jeff,
Yes.
sorry to break
That's
in
okay.
again.
No, it's fine.
So if one of the things that I would love to be able to do, and I don't know, maybe there's a way to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
if let's say I have an EQ automated,
Yes.
okay, and like a vocal EQ, and we're going through the tune, and I'm moving
Mhm.
some EQs around.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I would love to be able to do, if that
Mhm.
if the EQ, if the plugins are in trim mode,
Mm-hmm.
is to be able to trim the entire equalization mode, plus or minus, say, 2 dB at a particular section, so that all the rides of the EQs are available, but a +2 or -2. Is there a
Yeah.
way to do that? In trim?
No, there's not. And yeah, that feature has come up, that request has come up before. So yeah, obviously you can trim volume automation all day. But yeah, you're specifically talking about just a couple dB of trimming on the parameters for the EQ. And there's currently not a way to do that, but that's a great feedback, and it's something we should pass on. So yeah, right now the changes that you make to those parameters of the EQ are absolute. So yeah, we'll pass it on, absolutely. While we're in there, we're almost out of time, but let's just talk a little bit about some of those really powerful things like preview and capture and snapshots and stuff like that. So let's go to the EQ, we'll bring it up, and we'll just dive into EQ37. We'll just dump it over here so you can see it. I just have a quick selection defined. And we're gonna just enable this. Again, you could press the function switch. That's a quick way to do it. That works. Let's just, I don't know, we'll turn some filters on here, I guess. And we'll just do whatever. Okay, so let's just play with this a little bit. So I'm touching some parameters, right? Those are primed. I have latch prime on stop enabled, right? Which basically means if I hit play now, I'm writing automation. And since I'm in touch latch, the encoders are latching, right? I can hit then write to all. And what that just did is it said, just, you know what? I don't want to keep going. I've got a selection. Whatever I just did, just extend that through the whole selection, right? That's what that did. Now, in addition to that, the other really powerful thing is preview, right? And you mentioned preview before. Preview says, I got tons of automation. I've been working on this thing all day. The second that I touch any type of parameter on the desk, let's just go grab filters. They're going to isolate. You're going to see flashing green on whatever you grab, right? Intentionally to say, you know what? You are trying something different and you're isolating what was already there, right? And so suspend preview, if I take it off, it's playing back what was there, right? And I guess we could go to loop real quick here. It's playing back what was there, right? So preview is suspended. That's the printed snapshot of automation on disk. I take it off. This is my working buffer, if you will, right? Now, the cool thing about that is while you're working in that buffer, you can capture it either just to use it one time, or you can dump it into a snapshot, which is even more powerful. So while I'm kind of getting that setting, I could then basically say, and what I would probably do is I would go into shift one. Shift one is all automation. And I'm going to say, I want to see snapshots up here, right? And so that I'm just kind of, I'm staying in the automation mixing mode, the red, but I'm just kind of doing some local page jumps to kind of get what I want, right? So I'm going to basically do a capture, okay? And I want to preserve that. And then I can do basically I can say save snapshot, and I can dump it into a slot. And then let's just rename this, for lack of a better name, that's Bob, okay? So if I take preview off, turn preview off, it is back to representing the automation that was printed on the disk, right? If I clear my selection, I can move my playhead. Let's move my playhead back here. These are, these are in latch, prime, and stop, right? So if I go basically snapshot one, which is Bob, punch capture, it's going to recall Bob. And I changed the fader and I changed a bunch of stuff on EQ3. If I hit play, it's in latch, prime, and stop, which means it's set those values for the EQ, right? So now I can auto match, and if you want to be really clever, you can either match out of everything on the kick drum, or you can just say match out of EQ or match out of plugins, right? So you could actually do what do we got here? Let's go match out of plugins, right? And so the fader is still writing. The sends might still be writing. The pan is still writing, okay? So that's kind of what that is. But preview is powerful because you don't have to mess up what's already there. You can then just go into an isolate mode, right? And these are all isolated, right? These volumes are isolated. These, in this case now, these EQs are isolated, okay? So that's really what that's about. And you can A/B it, and then you can flush the buffer and come back out. Not enough time.
To flush the buffer.
You've got to flush the buffer, right? I tell my kids that all the time.
One question.
Yeah.
When you're one of the things that I've had issue with occasionally, because I'm an older guy, I forget some of the things I've done before. And let's say I'm at a recording session and I'm going to record a track, and I have a selection.
Okay.
And I press record button, but then I realize, oh my God, this is going to stop when it gets to the end of a selection that I forgot that I made. And so I want to be able to change that selection after I hit play or record to extend it or to get rid of it. It's, and it doesn't happen often, but it happens enough for me to say, oh shit. And then I have to, obviously I've stopped the recording. So is there any way, once you've made a selection and then you hit play or record, for you to lose that selection?
Yeah, there's not, is there, Gil?
Gil's mic isn't working.
No,
it is. Yeah, no, it's working again.
Dynamic?
Give me 2 seconds. I'm trying to look and see if we can do that on dynamic transport.
Yeah.
That was the only thing I was thinking. If that could be, yeah, you would have to live in dynamic transport mode, right, for that to be possible.
But in record, yeah, I think Gil is testing it too. I'm trying to.
Yeah, that'd be great. If that's a workaround, that'd be great. Yeah.
It works in play. We need to confirm it works in record.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it won't work in record.
We are trying to determine that in a moment.
Okay.
Gil is testing that too. I'm trying to as well.
While he's looking at that up real quick, I want to show, this is always something that is this always comes up. So I want to show this, show fader values, right? So, I'm going to set this to off real quick. and we're going to show some different things right here real quick. So I'm going to do Shift asterisk. Shift asterisk is our preference. It's just a way to get to the same settings, but in a different view. And I'm going to turn on just more than you possibly need. Workstation, track numbers and workstation numbers. So it's going to kind of look a little bit cluttered right now. But I just wanted to show, you can show the workstation number if you've got a bunch of workstations. You can show the track number, absolute track number, turn that off. And then you get to pick the behavior of the values when you touch the fader. Right now it's set to never, right? You can go through here and look at various different options. I think probably the best, in my opinion, the best one for my use case is timed at fader release, which basically says, after I let go, keep the value up for, whatever, 3/4 of a second, totally up to you, but you can play with this. But there's lots of different options in here as to how that value, if you want the value, is displayed on the desk. Right now, it's going to be 3/4 of a second, and then it's back to the channel name. But I know there's some people that never like to lose their channel names, and that's also an option in there.
All right, so I just tried it in playback and dynamic transport. You can change the length of that selection in the actual timeline bar at the top of the edit page.
Okay.
But if you start recording, it will only record because it pre-buffers. It will only Actually, hang on a second. I was not in punch mode. Let me go to punch and try it. So hang on.
Can you? Oh, you can. You're right.
All right, let's try this again. Nope. In your record
Doesn't
mode,
work.
You can change the playback selection so it would actually go further, but if a track was in record, it will only record what the selection was. That would probably have to be something that would be a pretty big overhaul to the recording engine to get that to work more on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something we can pass on, certainly.
Absolutely.
But it's a great idea.
I've heard many people ask for this, feature in terms of automation to be able to extend a selection,
Right. Yeah, that's a slightly different use case. I was thinking about the same thing when you mentioned that, but the nature of having a dynamic selection.
I think the thing is here is like anything that goes into record, whether you're recording automation moves or you're recording, if you have a predetermined selection, it's not going to let you go beyond that. At least in today's paradigm, the playback engine, especially in dynamic transport, it's very elastic, lets you change that. But anything that's kind of set in a record buffer, when you start that playhead with a track and record or either automation enabled, it definitely had to be something that would have to be a pretty invasive thing to get to work. But like just said, definitely something we can pass on.
It's a really good idea. I know we're out of time, but I want to show one last thing that I think I started to talk about, but is really important, and with S6 is really very useful, especially in a small console, I would argue. And that's the conversation about attention knob zones that can either be suspended or enabled. And so the idea here is that you can on the fly say, I want this knob to just now work as a fat channel, right? Analogous to the decommand, decontrol, anything attention or focus, right? Whatever track that is, I want you to fly into there and show me that. Again, in this case, it's dynamics, but it could be EQ, or it could be a number of different things. And I know you can't see I do have an actually dedicated knob, which is right now in EQ. Just trust me that I have that. But I want to show one more thing that I think is pretty cool, and that is taking advantage of attention presets. And the idea there is, if you just want to quickly change what that fat channel is seeing, you can leverage attention presets, because all I've got to do is now press the alternate and then re-attention this track. And now I'm on the same, in this case, it's a kick. On the same scenario, I'm EQing again the full channel as we described, And it's it's a quick way to say, now every time I go, I want EQ, right? Conversely, I can change the preset. Now every time I bring you up, I want sends. Conversely, now every time I come up, I want signal chain, so I can pick what I want to control. That's a top level chain. I can push into boom, and now I've got control over my synth, or my drum machine in this case. And then iterate, obviously, right? So you get to pick what you want to see on attention, which is really, really powerful. And it's just a quick way to change the whole orientation of that fat channel. And so once you're done with it, once you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm going to work in line now, you simply go back to the top level and you hit knob active, and that suspends that dedicated behavior, right? And now I'm in line once again, and I can choose to, go to the room, and I can work in line, and I can then go back and say what we did before, which was EQ expand. I'm sorry, not expand. EQ. Yeah, what do we do here? Expand. EQ expand. Okay, so now I'm working individually, right, as we described. So I just wanted to contrast those two workflows with individual control, and then on the fly, it's now a fat channel, and it's whatever you want it to be, right? It could be dyne, it could be EQ, and it's like total control over that attention or focus track, if you will. Okay.
And like Jeff said, that's really great for smaller consoles. For those that have bigger consoles, you can easily dedicate things out and have things always show up in that place. And
exactly.
That's one of the really great, or even if you do have a big console, you might want things to move around and have these different presets. And I think that's one of the great things about moving from, while Icon Decontrol Decommand was a really great surface, we are now at the point of maturity with S4, S6 that we have way beyond what you can do and how you can set up different workflows to work for how you want, whether it's you want these dedicated fat channels to always come up, or you can have them show up in different places on the fly, depending on what you're particularly doing at that given time. And once you get all this kind of set down and it becomes kind of second nature, it's just like we've always said when we were talking about with Icon back in the day, you get used to those things, and it's just, it's so much faster than just mousing around. And this just takes it to a whole different place because of all the customization you can do to make it work the way you want.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, okay, one last thing. Just because I love the idea of customization, and I'm kind of a maniac when it comes to soft keys. So I want to show you a couple soft key things really quick. Just the nature of, if it doesn't do it right now, you can probably make it do something. I think that's a really important understand. And again, this is a really, Gil just kind of segued from coming from Decommand Decontrol. That's out of the box, certainly soft keys and everything on there is really like, this is what it does. This is always what it's going to do. Not the case with S4 and S6. S4 and S6 is so malleable and customizable. I just want to show you something really, really quick. So I'm just going to we're going to do this really fast. I'm going to go into groups. We're back on our drums. I'm looking at drums over here too, really quick. I've gone, and if I touch I repurposed a couple things. You're going to see that this is now delete tracks. This is now new track. This is now duplicate track. And it's just whatever function in Pro Tools you want to map on a switch, totally up to you, right? So the application is, let me make a new track. Let me add a new track to the session, right? And maybe it's another new percussion track or drum track or whatever it might be. So I'm going to choose at the end of the kick drum, I'm going to hit select. So that means it's going to build next to it, right? Is what that means. So I'm going to press basically, give me a new track. Okay. There's your new track, audio 2. I want to rename that really quickly. So I'm going to attention it. And I just double touch in here, and we're gonna call this Susie.
And for those that aren't aware, Jeff has a USB keyboard hooked up to
I do, yeah.
So
otherwise, yeah.
Touch screen. So.
Good point. You would have to use a little on screen. That's right. Yeah, but I use it all the time, so I find it faster. So I want to quickly go into groups. We talked about this before, but I can now just quickly add this to the drums group. You see Susie, and you probably, it's off the sheet, isn't it? Yeah, Susie showed up, but you saw a ripple over there, and that's really what that did. So if I'm done with Susie, I can then delete that track. Certainly, it's still selected, and then take advantage of my soft key, which is right here, to just say, hey, boom, get rid of that track. And I can then blow that track away, and Susie's gone, right? A better way in this workflow, maybe, would be to select one of the tracks already in the drum group and just do a dupe and don't duplicate the playlists. That's what I would probably do. And so give yourself a dupe option. Insert sends, yes. Signal flow routing, yes. VCA, yes. No playlist. Good to go. And then all you got to do is, go back into that and rename that. And, now this is the world's best djembe, right? Whatever it is. Okay. So now good to go because it's part of the group. It's part of the VCA, and it's got all the cool starting place for my, whatever my default EQ or comp is. I can remove them, but it's a good place to start. And again, that's just a very simple soft key application, but you can get really, really crazy. But the point being, if it makes sense for what you're doing all day, reprogram some of these keys. It's just really, we defined these in a way that we thought would be useful, but it's not the end all. You can customize all of this, right? The actual, OLED sections, the actual physical switches. If you're doing something all day when you're recording, put it on one of the transport switches. We see people put the talkback on the LOC switch all the time. So make it yours, customize it, make it, mold the tool to fit your workflow.
Yeah. One thing I just want to add to that, to what Jeff and Gil said, you can of course customize this to a crazy level, then it travels with you. That's the best part, right? All these settings get saved in a Pro Tools session. You could be traveling to a studio in South Africa with a similar layout of the S4 or S6. You open up a Pro Tools session, all that craziness just comes through immediately. There's nothing you have to configure again. All those soft key assignments, everything you did is already there.
And is that, Tony, is that running on Yukon or something proprietary? In other words, what's the protocol that you're using on the network?
It's powered by you. Oh, go for it.
Yeah, it's all Yukon. Whether you're running S4, S6, which we consider our workstation class of Yukon, or you're running an S1 with Avid Control, which we consider U-Control, the backbone of everything is Yukon. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and all that data, all that stuff that Tony mentioned, really importantly, layouts, swap layer, lock state, spill zones, et cetera, that can all travel. Yeah, all travel back to the Pro Tools session so that you open the session, it's all there. You're ready to go.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for stopping by. We appreciate it. And this will be the last session of the year. We'll kick it up again in January. And thanks very much.